Sean here with BaseMint Comics, and it is time for another Cornerbox Classic. So, the great Stan Lee said, everybody's issue is someone's first. So if this is your first time to the channel or first time checking out Cornerbox Classics, what it is I have a pretty extensive back issue collection that I have acquired over my 35 years of collecting. And years ago, I did a complete X-Men reread in like continuity story order in this massive spreadsheet that I had built so that all the titles kind of flowed together. And I did this in a way where I started obviously with X-Men #1 and moved through. And one of the things that I did to make it more interesting / difficult for me was every month that the books came out, I only listened to music that came out at that time period. So X-Men #2, the first appearance of Vanisher, I listened to like The Searchers, Needles and Pins, and so on and so forth. And then when I got to the present of the X-Men, I was like, that was fun. I've read a lot of X-Men. It's been a couple years. Haven't really, other than new books, like dabbled in much of the rest of the Marvel Universe, of my back issues as they were piling up. And so I was like, hey, I've now completed some runs of Avengers and Amazing Spider-Man and Fantastic Four and stuff. So it's time that I read that stuff from the 60s forward. So basically that's where this was sort of birthed, was I started to read all of my back issues, and then I started the channel about 6 months ago, and so missing about 20 years there, because I had read from 61 to October of 81 in its entirety as I was doing this. So like, for instance, read Fantastic Four, read Amazing Spider-Man, and as a book like Champions came out, and I'm trying to find where, yeah, here we go. As Champions came out, first appearance of Swarm, Nazi scientist made of bees. It's fantastic. If you've never checked out, the two-parter Champions 14 and 15, I would highly recommend it. Anyways, point is like, I started to pull in everything that I had as it was coming out. Read all of Miss Marvel, etc., etc. And so that leads us to today, where I am going to go over some books from April 27th, 1982. So how I've been doing this is I just go week to week. Like I was, technically April 27th, 1982, I would have been 6 months old. But if I had been the age, like I started getting into comics in the early 90s, and I would pedal up to my comic book shop in my neighborhood, and I still do. And I listen to music when I do that. And so this is sort of like, if I was that age in 1982, 1983, 1987, what would I be grabbing off of the rack? And then I kind of talk about it as though they were new comics. So this week is April 27th, 1982. If I had biked up to the shop on April 27th, 1982, I probably would have been listening to Modern English's I Melt With You on my headphones as I pedaled to the store to grab these 4 classics. And so, yeah, so that's how it is. I just go through week to week in order. Next week will be May 4th, 1982. And I talk about these books. So let's get into it. First up, Daredevil #185, Guts, from April 27th, 1982. Written by Frank Miller. The art's by Klaus Johnson. Letters by Joseph Rosen, and the cover is by Frank Miller and Klaus Johnson. Jansen, maybe? I don't know. I met him recently at Motor City Comic Con, and I took 2 books with me. I took a Daredevil book, and I took Gambit #1, because I love that miniseries. I still do, but I mean, I loved it when I was a kid. And I was like, he was kind of pricey when it came to charging for signatures. So I was like, choices must be made, and I chose Gambit #1. this is not a knock on any the Daredevil run. I'm not bringing anything new to the table when it comes to talking about Frank Miller and Klaus Jensen's Daredevil run. Everybody knows it's fantastic. It's certainly one of the top tier books out of this time period, and I would have been thrilled to have been reading it in 1982 if I'd been able to open my eyes. So this opens up with a page, which, okay, so it opens up in a fourth wall breaky type of way where Matt, like, and it's good. Like, this is a good thing. If you were like, this is the first issue of Daredevil that I'm picking up, it gives you a quick recap of Daredevil and his powers as he's like, I'm not going to be the narrator of this story. Foggy Nelson is. But it's actually one of the things that I liked about Claremont's run of X-Men is there wasn't a lot of that, like, hey, true believers, you're reading a comic book right now. And I love that. I particularly enjoy that in the 60s Silver Age stuff when Stan did that. But for some odd reason, like, having that 17-year run of Claremont's where he didn't, like, call out that you were reading a comic book really made the, like, world feel real. Like I was just a fly on the wall of things that were actually happening. And so sometimes in, like, Avengers, they will kind of be like, and now in our story and they'll cut to, like, another, and that, like, kind of, not in a way that's going to, like, make me not enjoy the story or be, like, a huge complaint or anything like that. But it is, like, it's jarring for me. I'm sure are people out there who love that, and that's cool. But I sort of like, so this is interesting to me because there's kind of this opening page where Matt's like, quiet, we're gonna head over to our story. And I understand the device because of the way that this is done. It's about to flip, and it's going to be noir, and it's Foggy kind of doing a very noir narration throughout this story, and it's great. And I will say this right out of the gate before we even get into it. This is one of my favorite issues of Daredevil of all time. I think it's fantastic. It's a great Foggy piece. It's funny. It's suspenseful. But, like, most of all, it's just kind of like a little charming Foggy story. Anyways, so it opens up with Heather Glenn going to see Foggy because in the last issue, she found out that her father's company, which has sort of been left to her, but kind of not really because the CEOs are running the show, she's discovered that they're making bombs. And she's not thrilled about this. And so there is this great, like, this is sort of the opening page of the story where Heather shows up to the office. And I love the fact, like, she basically, like, is talking to, she's talking to Foggy. He thinks that she's there to see Matt. And she's like, no, I was just in the neighborhood. And I, like, you know, she's trying to kind of play it off. And then she cuts to it and she's like, I'm in trouble, Foggy. Deep trouble, and you're the only man who can help me. When I was reading this, like, it felt like that was just these 3 panels were like the opening of a movie. And then when she says, and you're the only man on earth who can help me, it, like, cuts to black. You get the Stanley Presents, and then you get the title card of Guts. And it felt very cinematic to me. So she obviously explains to Foggy, like, what's going on. Hey, I figured out the company's working for, or not working for, but making bombs. I don't know why they're doing this, and I got to get to the bottom of it. And then Matt shows up, and Foggy has some narration in this where he kind of, like, points out, like, Matt couldn't have been able to hear what he heard, but he's standing in the doorway acting like he did. And so Foggy kind of, you know, brushes him off and says he and Heather are going to go out to dinner to catch up because they haven't chatted in a while. And then you see them leave and Matt dons the costume. Then it cuts to Glen Industries. You can see in a fantastic, like, one of the things is everybody always talks, I don't know, as far as I've seen, everyone always talks about Klaus Jensen's or Frank Miller's art in this, but I don't see too much of, like, the tip of the cap given to how good Klaus Jensen is. And so knowing this was actually the issue that I took with me to get possibly signed. But I really dig that panel of Matt hanging on the outside of the building, listening to what's going on, kind of following the two of them around, and where the CEO basically like lays out like, she signed the paperwork, so she's culpable too. Like, yeah, this is what we're doing, but as her lawyer, like, not saying that we are making bombs, but if we were, she signed on the dotted line, she signed off of it, so she's as much as fault as we would be if that's what we were doing. And so then, they leave. Heather's like, oh, my father worked for this. I would like to fight for this. And so Foggy is basically like, I'll do it. And I may run into a foot or two of red tape, but I'll get to the bottom of this. No ifs, ends, or buts. And this is important because stylistically, on the very next page, you see Foggy sort of go to different places to try to cut through the red tape. And each explanation of it starts off with like, if, and, or but. And I just love like how this was done. Like, as he's like, no ifs, and, or buts. And then you see in this panel, him sort of walking away, sulking away, defeated after this like mile of red tape that he's had to go through, and it isn't working. So then he's like, screw it, if I can't, like, this is like Foggy's Daredevil moment where he's like, lawyering isn't going to work this, so I'm going to get to the bottom of it, on the streets. And so then it cuts to Foggy sort of going around town asking about this shipment of bombs, etc., etc. And the funny thing is, like, the charming thing about the writing is the narration of him doing the noir thing is as though he's like tough and he's talking about how like but then the actual, so he's like talking tough in the narration as he navigates the city, but then what he's actually doing is like shelling out money. Like this one guy is like, I'll talk if you give me 50. And he's like, okay. And he's like, actually it's 100. And Foggy's like, okay. But in the narration, he's like talking like he's tough. And he winds up getting clobbered by this dude. And then wakes up like around some seedy folks. And hats off to Foggy here, because as he wakes up after being knocked unconscious by this goon, surrounded by a bunch of other goons, Foggy's a pretty quick thinker and suddenly decides that he's going to go by the name Foggy Guts Nelson. Or, the name's Nelson, Guts Nelson. He never says Foggy. And so Turk's there. Turk is one of, like, my favorite weird, like, he's just a goon in Daredevil that you sort of feel bad for because he just wants to be good at it and just kind of is a joke amongst his peers. So they're basically like, just kill Foggy. And the lights go out right at that point, and this is where like Matt's there. And so Foggy thinks he's actually like doing stuff to take these guys out in the dark, but it's actually Matt behind him as Daredevil. So when the lights get clicked back on, Foggy's sitting on top of this pile of goons. And Turk, one of the guys gives the order to kill him. And Turk's like, I don't know, man. This guy just took out your team in like a minute, like 6 of your guys in a minute. I think I might be on his side. He's got the brains and the guts. He just doesn't have the vision, and I have vision. And there is a panel here as this is going on where Matt kind of does because he is, now Foggy is stuck with Turk. And Daredevil is very familiar with Turk at this point. So they wind up going to, and this is like, again, more power to Foggy because I would have bailed at this point, but they wind up in the offices of the Kingpin. And so the Kingpin's like, the dude in the room before you get to the Kingpin is basically like, Turk, Kingpin doesn't have time for you. And he's like, yeah, but is he going to have time for Guts Nelson? He just took out 6 of, our competition's guys in a minute flat. And so he lets him in. Kingpin's in there, and obviously, like, the shipment of bombs and what they're doing with it, the Kingpin is talking to some guys on the radio about this. And so Matt, he bolts to take care of the shipment of bombs. And so you kind of get this like back and forth between what Matt's doing and what's happening with Foggy and the Kingpin. And Turk at one point like kind of pushes Foggy into the Kingpin and is like, "You've been tapped for a top hitman ever since Bullseye snuffed that lady assassin you was using, then got busted up himself. I figure you're looking for a new man." And then there's this hilarious panel of Turk pointing like to a just shocked Foggy. Like Foggy is way in over his head. So Matt winds up like, these guys are like, "Oh, no sign of Daredevil, like don't worry about it." And so then Kingpin kind of like shuts off the radio for a second and goes back to like talking to Foggy and isn't thrilled about him being there, and is basically like, "If you're this good, how come I've never heard of you?" And at that point, Daredevil winds up destroying what they're looking for. Like he takes out the guys on the dock and messes this up. And Foggy, once again, thinking light on his feet, is basically like, "I got connections powerful enough to bring you down, Kingpin." And then the guys radio, it's like dead silent, but they radio that Daredevil got there when they're finally like back to it. And so, you know, basically Kingpin's going to kill Foggy at this point. And so Daredevil makes light work of the goons and then grabs the walkie-talkie and is like, "I got 5 words for you, Kingpin." Because Foggy was like, "Yeah, Daredevil's he's on my team." And so when Daredevil grabs the walkie-talkie, he's like, "I got 5 words for you. Don't mess with Guts Nelson." And so basically then Kingpin's like, "All right, I want to work with you. Let's have our meeting right now." And Foggy's like, "Nope, Monday. I got to do it Monday." And so he like blows cigar smoke into King. I mean, the balls on Foggy Nelson in this issue, it's outstanding. So finally Kingpin acquiesces and like, "Fine, like get out of my office. We'll meet on Monday." And so him and Turk leave. And then it cuts to the airport and they're in a plane. And Turk's like, "Why do we got to go to Chicago?" And Guts is like, "We got people in Chicago. We're going to bring them back with us." And so, you know, Turk's like, "All right, I'm following you. I got the vision." And Guts is like, "I got to use the bathroom." And starts to walk one way. And Turk's like, "Yeah, but the bathroom's that way." And then he puts it together that he is on his way to Chicago. And Guts is not on the plane as it flies away. And that's where the issue ends. It's this fun, like, noir. Like, I laughed. I was a little bit concerned for Guts Nelson. But overall, I just thought that was an absolute blast. And, like, the entire Miller Jensen Daredevil run is a high water mark. It's some of the best comic books ever put to pulp. And I mean, if you just want a one and done fun Foggy Nelson story, this is where it's at. That it's going to be my favorite of the week. It's hard this week to top Daredevil. Not to say that any of the other stuff is bad. It's all good. But that is some of the best of the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s. In fact, right now, I mean, it's obviously, my heart belongs to Uncanny X-Men at this moment. John Byrne's Fantastic Four is obviously firing on all cylinders at this point. And this it's just a really good, like, I'm happy that I have all these back issues. I'm happy that I've read them. I'm happy that I'm reading them right now. But I gotta say, if there's anybody that's watching that actually was like biking up to their local 7-Eleven, or if you're in the UK and you were going to your news agent, that's a fun term that's way better than drugstore. Thanks, geeky old hog. Yeah, I get the dragon you guys are chasing. Like, it doesn't, I would too. I know when I was like coming up, I was like, oh man, the 90s is the best. And I love that stuff for nostalgia purposes. But man, the books during this time period, so good. So good. Anyways, speaking of a book that I love, that I have read multiple times, and I mean this with 100% sincerity, I truly love this series, is Dazzler, number 18, The Absorbing Man Wants You, released April 27th, 1982, written by Danny Fingeroth, pencils by Frank Springer, inks by Vince Colletta, letters by Janice Chang, colors by Don Warfield, and a beautiful cover by Bill Sienkiewicz. And speaking of the pencils by Frank Springer, that dude does not get enough credit for how wonderfully he draws the ladies. Issue opens up with Dazzler jamming with the Thing and Johnny Storm. Thing's wailing away on the sax. Johnny's playing guitar. Reed's trying to work in the background. I don't think they're playing the same song, according to what Ben says in this. And what Reed's working on is some type of gizmo or gadget that will, like, amplify Allison's powers. And so he tries to give it to her, and she's like, listen, man, I cannot stress this enough. I do not want to get into superhero shenanigans. All she wants to do is sing, man. She wants to be, making her way with her musical career. Doesn't want to do anything with super heroics. And that's when Sue pulls the move that freaks everybody out, where she just, like, blinks into existence because she was invisible. And she's like, hey, like, you might not want to be in this life, but you are. Like, you've, caught up with Lightmaster and, Terrax and Galactus, which is ridiculous, but also hilariously and good Dazzler fun. So she's like, just take the thing. Like, don't argue with Reed, just take it. Like, you don't have to suddenly don a costume and kick ass. You can just take this thing so that you have it, just in case anything goes wrong. So she does. Then we get a follow-up to last issue where incredibly out of character, creepy Warren Worthington was hitting on Allison, and then decided that the way he would win her heart was by tracking down her mother. So he flies to her childhood home and runs into her grandmother and gets welcomed into the home by the grandmother. And, cool it, Warren. You're still in a relationship with Candy Southern. I don't know what you're doing. Then we cut to, obviously, Allison's father is a judge, and he is just he's presiding over a case and is not really there. And so a recess is called, and that's kind of the end of that. There's like this little, just one page. Then we cut to Absorbing Man, who is kind of licking his wounds from a beatdown from the Avengers that he got, which I believe was during the Byrne. Like, there was like a 10-issue great run where Byrne fought him on the docks. Really cool cover. I should have pulled it out before I did this, but I didn't. So he's like staying in this room, and he kind of just goes through the Avengers fight. And then what I believe was an Incredible Hulk issue, but I don't have this one, and there is no editor note to tell me where it was. So if you know where this Incredible Hulk story takes place, what issue or issues, it's where the Absorbing Man gets, like, he ends up on Easter Island and is basically, like, worshipped like a god. Like, he's, like, part of the island, and the people who are living there, like, start a fire, and it wakes him up. And so then they worship him as a god, and that's all going great. He's digging that, and then he's fighting anybody who, like, tries to dethrone him, which is a dumb move. I've been yapping a lot because you can tell that the tea is starting to cool because Cyclops' visor is not as bright. So he basically leaves, hightails it back, and this is where he winds up. There's also this ad for Lifesavers, and if you can see, the apple right there is circled. And when I read Daredevil, all of these issues this week have this ad, and I was like, oh, some kid gave up after just giving one. And I was like, that's a bummer. And then when I read this one, I was like, oh, weird. Somebody did that twice. That's wild. And then when I got to the third issue, I was like, oh, I think they do that so that you can have an idea of how to do this. Anyways. So then Absorbing Man has a copy of Rolling Stone, sees Dazzler with the Avengers. He's seeking revenge on the Avengers. So he's like, his word's not mine. But he's basically like, if I kidnap that broad, I can get some revenge on the Avengers. And that's where we're at. And so she is out on a date with her buddy Ken, who's a little bit annoyed by Warren Worthington's presence from last issue. And Allison tells him not to worry about it while she's thinking about flying around New York with Warren, which is, everybody sucks. Like, everybody sucks. So they're at, the baseball game, and she's like, don't worry about it. Cuts to Harry Osgood and Lance. I can't think of Lance's. Lance Steele. So Harry's her, obviously, manager. Lance is like his maybe bodyguard, but, Allison's tougher than he is. Absorbing Man shows up there, and I gotta give Harry credit. Harry's one of those characters that, like, you would think that Fingerroth would write as like a sleazebag in here. I don't know. Like, it would be so easy to be like, oh, our manager's a sleaze. But he actually, when Absorbing Man is like, which one of you is Harry Osgood? He like immediately is like, I am. Like, and then I give him credit for, like, if a 8-foot-tall Absorbing Man kicked in my door and was like, where's Sean? And I'd be like, he's over there. But Harry doesn't do that. He's a good guy. Eventually, though, Lance does give up where Allison is performing, and she's doing the gig with her band and clicks on Reed's like power booster thing, and just starts like messing with the crowd. Like, this isn't like a normal light show. It's way too much. People are like freaking out. They're blinded. They're getting headaches. It's terrible. So she, basically shuts the thing down, kicks it backstage, and like throws the thing in kind of her makeup kit, and it's like not using that. And of course you're like, oh man, she could have used that on Absorbing Man, but now it's stuck backstage. So she goes back to the gig. He busts through the door as he's wont to do, and she figures, I gotta get backstage. So she goes to grab the thing. Absorbing Man stops her. He's like, this must have been, he doesn't realize she's a mutant. So he's like, this thing must have been the thing that you used to put on the light show. Like, I'm gonna use it. And so she kind of shows him how to use it, because she's like, this dumbass is gonna turn this thing on, then I can blast him. And that's the end of that. So she does it. She gives it her all. And what winds up happening is we get a, building size Absorbing Man at the end of the issue. And they promise that in next issue, we enter Black Bolt. And I imagine Dazzler's powers mixed with Black Bolt is going to be pretty awesome. So tune in for when we pedal up to the shop to pick up Dazzler number 19. But again, I think that's a book that for years people were like, it's like a joke. And I enjoy, and I know that like I have a like musical background, and so I kind of like enjoy the soap opera. She's trying to make it as a musician element is big for me in the book. In the same way that I liked that the most recent Disney Plus Wonder Man show was like more about Simon trying to like avoid being a superhero, and being an actor. I really dug that. It was a nice change of pace. I don't know. If you have not watched Wonder Man, it is a quick watch and a lot of fun. Anyways, that's not what you're here for. You're here for Marvel 2-in-1 number 90. Eyes of the Sorcerer, released April 27th, 1982, written by Jan S. Stranad. It's S-T-R-N-A-D. I actually looked this up when I first read a comic by this person, because I thought maybe it was a like a pen name, for someone else, but it turned out not to be the case. It's just a weird last name. Pencils by Alan Kupperberg, inks by Jim Mooney, letters by Diana Albers, colors by George Roussos, and cover by Ed Hannigan and Al Milgrom. So this one opens up with Deb Whitman and Peter Parker hanging out at the Renaissance Fair, and in our quest to get to know each other, a friend of mine, actually, I was at her house today, they weren't there. They're in Disney. I was just checking in. But I went to high school together, and in the summertime, I would, for extra cash, paint swords and shields because her family runs like the Renaissance Festival here, and she works at the Swords and Shields booth. So it was a good way to make some extra comic book cash, was to paint swords and shields at the Renaissance Fair. So when this opened up there, I was like, oh, cool. So Deb and Pete are hanging out at the Renaissance Festival, or Renaissance Fair, and you see a magician trying to get himself out of handcuffs in this, and he's saying some spells, and obviously, like, they're not real, or are they? But he can't get out of there. And so then a kid eyes everybody's ever-loving blue-eyed thing walking through there with Alicia, because she's got like a sculpture exhibit at the fair. And I gotta hand it to him. I got real tired of the trope of, like, all kids are terrified of Ben Grimm. And so this kid is actually just, like, jazzed to, like, even Ben's like, oh crap, here it comes. This kid's not gonna be into it. But the kid is actually, like, thrilled to see him, and super excited, and, like, asks for him to, like, give him a lift and put him up on his shoulders. And so that's pretty, crowd starts to gather around, and Deb, Pete's sitting there thinking, like, oh, I know him. But he doesn't know that I know him, because he only knows me as Spider-Man. And then Deb's like, hey, I'd really like to talk to, like, Alicia Masters, because I really like her art. So we should go over there and see if we can, kick off a conversation. Then we cut back to the magician guy and his gal, who is currently trying to get him out of the handcuffs. And he all of a sudden has a vision of two sorcerers, a guy named Sardith and another one named Salamis, and they're fighting. And Sardith suddenly, like, burst into flames, and the Salamis guy is like, what the hell just happened to him? And he's gone. And then all of a sudden we cut back to our Renaissance Fair magician, and he is possessed by Sardith. And so he's kind of a jerk to this guy's girl, which sort of sucks, because she just kind of walks away. I actually felt bad, because I was like, well, that's a bummer that they just kind of, this weird, like, I mean, I don't know yet what's going to happen, but I was like, that stinks that he's messing up this dude's relationship. So then Pete's chatting away with Alicia Masters, and this pisses off Deb, because he's always blowing Deb off, which is a bum out. And so Deb, like, basically, like, taps him on the shoulder and is like, excuse me, Pete, I'm running off to live in Camelot with King Arthur, and now I'll never see you again. And he kind of brushes her off and is just like, oh yeah, that sounds great, Deb, see you in a little bit. And so she's like, forget you. And so then Alicia kind of makes a dig where she's like, he's asking her a question about her art, and how her, like, not having vision works with that. And she's like, well, I have enough vision to realize that you just really pissed off your date. And so he runs off to go see her. And again, we cut to our magician sorcerer guy, kind of figuring out that he's in a new area. And he, like I said, here's where he, like, brushes off the gal, and she just leaves defeated, and, like, we don't see her again. And so I kind of felt bad about that, because this dude's really gonna get it. So Pete and Ben Grimm start to take on this sorcerer, and he changes, like, one of the dudes that's, like, dressed up as a knight, doing, like, the jousting. He, like, quickly does a spell and turns him into, like, a bigger, scarier, like, demon knight. Pete changes into his costume. And Ben, the entire time that this fight is going on, is not really concerned about the fight at all. He's kind of letting Pete take care of it, because he's busy looking for Alicia. Like, he's worried about Alicia. So they wind up, like, taking this dude out, and then Deb and Alicia are together. They catch up, and Pete takes off after that, because he's like, it's weird that sorcerer, they're not 100% sure that he was a part of it, and Pete sees him, and he's like, weird that dude stuck around for all of this, and now he's taking off. So I'm going to follow him. To which he does, and then this guy calls forth a monster from underneath the earth, and so that monster comes out of there, and Ben kind of takes care of him, and Pete takes care of the sorcerer guy. This is way more fun than I'm actually explaining it to be, but trust me, it's just like a good, 2-in-1 is such a fun book, and I think I've said this before. I was kind of reminded by a comment that a buddy made in one of the videos. Is like, I thought when I was younger, I thought Marvel 2-in-1 was like reprints, like it was 2 stories in one, not that it was like a team-up book. I didn't realize that. So it was only until this when I was like, oh cool, it's just Marvel team-up with Ben Grimm, which is great, because I mean, who doesn't appreciate that? Wait, the gal did come back. She did come back when they knocked this dude out, and basically like Ben is like, I'm gonna crush the life out of you, and this girl's like, no, it's not his fault. And so Alicia kind of holds her back, because she's like, hey, just let this kind of play out. And so Sardith winds up like releasing the guy, and so he's back to normal. And then Pete's kind of like, hey, that's great that we stopped the sorcerer guy, but what are we gonna do about that big monster? And that's where it ends. And I have to admit, there are moments in Marvel 2-in-1 where like it ends like an 80s sitcom, where I just like, it's like freeze for like Pete makes this like quippy like, hey, what are we gonna do with this monster? And then everybody looks over there and laughs, and credits. Like, that is how I read Marvel 2-in-1, where I'm like, it ends with this like credit thing. So then thing of note is that on the very last page there is an in-house ad for this Hercules miniseries by Bob Layton that they are pushing at the end of this. It's the first time that it pops up, and I am jazzed for this. I am looking forward to read. I've never read it. I picked it up a few months back. There was a shop closing in our area that had a big like blowout, going out of business sale. I made a video about it, and I picked up a ton of stuff. And that Hercules miniseries was one of them, because I was pretty jazzed about possibly reading that. And so that's coming up when I get to 1983. So it is coming up relatively soon in Cornerbox Classics. So final book of the day, Spider-Woman number 45, Mission Impossible, April 27th, 1982, written by Chris Claremont, with art and cover by Steve Laiola, and letters by the great Tom Orzechowski. I did not read Spider-Woman from the beginning. I first got the issues of Spider-Woman when I was doing the X-Men thing, because Siren first appears in like a 2-parter. And when I realized that Chris Claremont had a decent, arc in Spider-Woman, I was like, well, hell, I'll pick up the Chris Claremont, Steve Laiola. I think that's how I say it. I met him once. He signed the Siren issue for me, but I think I might have asked him then how to pronounce his last name, but it did not stick, unfortunately. I'm sorry. So Spider-Woman 45. This is one of those moments where, like, as much as I love Claremont, I'm like, I don't feel it necessary to go much further. I'm not planning on going any further than Chris Claremont's run when it comes to Spider-Woman. No knock on Ann Nusenti, who takes over after him. It's just like, it's not really, it's not my cup of tea. And it's also one of those things that's kind of nice for me. Like, I loved Claremont's Iron Fist. The Byrne art helped. But this was nice for me to be like, oh, I don't love, like, Claremont's my favorite writer, but I don't necessarily, it was nice to have something where I was like, this is okay. Because it makes me realize that I'm not like, I don't know how you, like, I'm not just like, oh, Chris Claremont wrote it, it's fantastic. It's like, it's good, but that, like, it's not X-Men. And I say that knowing that, like, I thoroughly enjoyed his Marvel team-up stuff, thoroughly enjoyed the Iron Fist stuff. This just, I don't know, it's all right. I don't know how much rereadability there is for me as far as Spider-Woman goes. However, Steve Laiola is a great artist, and I love one of my favorite things. I feel like this is lacking in you don't see it too often, but I love it when when artists can do something really interesting with the title of the book. Like there's like an Avengers issue where they crash land in the Quinjet in the Savage Land, and like Into the Savage Land is like the title, and it's like kind of written into the side of the mountain and the rubble. And like Days of Future Past, when you open up that, the Days of Future Past is written in the rubble. And I dug that the credits for this and the title were the spines of the books. I just thought that was really cool. I will also say Impossible Man is hit or miss. He's like Q on Star Trek. It's like sometimes I love it, sometimes I hate it. So Impossible Man shows up basically dressed like Humphrey Bogart, looking for Sam Spade because he needs to find his wife. And so Jessica decides to take the case to find the Impossible Man's wife. And like he's basically like, hey, I would have gone to the, he's annoying, he's the Impossible Man, and he's like, would have gone to the Fantastic Four, but they're not around, so I came to you. So she winds up taking the case, and then like in that panel you can see as they leave that the Impossible Man's wife is there. So they're like on this quest, and she's hiding in plain sight. So they go around town looking for his wife. Obviously, the Impossible Man is like raised on television and again annoying, and so she's sort of like he's just kind of getting into mischief. And while he's doing this, there is a robbery where a jewelry store is robbed, and so they see a guy running, and Impossible Man immediately thinks like, oh, that must be the guy that robbed the place. So he goes and traps him in a cage, and it turns out this in fact is not the robber, but the dude that was chasing the robber. So this obviously pisses off the crowd. They figure out where the jewel thief is, chase them down, and Impossible Man turns into a 17-ton I don't know weight, and suddenly drops on the front end of the car to stop them. There's another Lifesavers ad with Apple circled. And so basically like this is the point where like kind of everybody converges and is like, this is a disaster, we need to figure this out. And there's a police officer that is helping Jessica Drew along with this throughout the series. Not along with this, but there is a police officer who is helping. It's Lieutenant, I think her name's Lieutenant Morale, but I am not. Yep, Lieutenant Morrell, Morrel. Anyways, Jessica doesn't really trust her because Jessica, for a little bit in issues previously, thought she was connected with the Yakuza, which is like a thing that's been going on in Spider-Woman. And I have to, who in the 80s loved ninjas more than Miller and Claremont? Like, who out of those two loved ninjas more? Was it Claremont? Was it Miller? Because it is a well that they go back to quite a bit. So then, like, we cut to the actual jewel thieves as they're hiding out, realizing that Spider-Woman is onto them. And Spider-Woman and Impossible Man continue the search, wind up in a restaurant looking for his wife. And then they wind up going to a play because they've caught wind that the handoff, I believe, for the jewels, and there's like a woman there wearing some other jewels that they think they're going to steal there, is at this play. Obviously, Jessica is trying to like figure this out on the sly, but the Impossible Man is making that incredibly difficult. So he eventually like dresses himself up like Spider-Man, goes after the jewel thief, hilarity ensues as he does wind up like helping out, but it's a pretty big mess. I don't know. Like I said, I struggle with Impossible Man stuff because like it's either like this last year they released that Thing versus the All-in-One versus like the Marvel Universe. It was like a one-shot by Ed McGuinness and Ryan North, and it was fantastic, and it was an Impossible Man story, and I loved it. So I don't want to just write off the character, but like at times it's just sort of like, okay, this is going to be one of those issues. So they wind up like, you know, fixing the jewel heist. You get a panel of Claremont and Steve Loyola in there commenting on how this could only happen in San Francisco. And so then it is the two of them headed back to the office. And on the way back there, like Jessica basically puts it together of like, oh, you had a fight with your wife. She wasn't kidnapped. She didn't run. She's just staying away from you. And so when they get back, they're suddenly met by the fact that, hey, she's there. Like she's been here the whole time. Wrapped that up in a nice little bow. And then Jessica goes back to her apartment and has dinner with David, who like also lives in the building with her that she's been in a relationship with. And so like it sort of ends with the two of them having dinner, and obviously like cuts just like a sitcom when it should. And you are left with, in the next issue, the Yakuza shows up. So again, who did it better, Miller or Claremont? Who loves ninjas more? So Spider-Woman is not long for, I think there's only like 2 or 3 issues of Claremont's run there. Daredevil, Dazzler, and 2 and 1 are obviously with me until the end. But those would have been the 4 issues that I would have picked up had I pedaled up to my shop on April 27th, 1982, and they were pretty good. So there have been some people that have like, there's been an uptick in, you know, I just as surprised as you are, because I didn't think me, you know, I laughed with my wife when she was like, you should start a channel. I was like, I'm going to be talking about books that are 45 years old. Nobody cares. But some people do, and that's great, and I'm excited about that. I hope you are enjoying the books as much as I am, and if anybody does want to follow along, before I wasn't really saying anything, because I'm like, you can look this information up, and nobody, you know, but now I figure, hey, at the end, I'll kind of talk about what is next. So next week is May 4th. Next Cornerbox Classics is May 4th, 1982. It's Amazing Spider-Man number 231. Captain America 272, Doctor Strange 54, Micronauts 44, and Thor 322. And I am caught up with Micronauts. I was kind of reading that one from 2 points because I pulled it in before I had completed the run. So I went back and reread all of it. So stuff makes way more sense. Anyways, that is Cornerbox Classics for this week. We will be back on Wednesday. Weather right now says we will be having to take the car because we've had a warm-up, which has been great, but it looks like Wednesday is like a 100% chance of rain, and I'm not going to take the kid out to bike up to the comic book shop in the rain. So, new comics on Wednesday, and regular just old chatting, and then back with another Cornerbox Classics. So I appreciate anybody that checking this out. Please comment, let me know what you think of these. Did you pick these issues up off the comic rack? Do you have them in your back issue collection? Which ones were your favorite of that particular week? And yeah, thanks for following along and taking this ride with us. Bye.